Maid's daughter, mocked for inheriting abandoned home, what she found. Inside shocked everyone. Inside, the smell of old cedar and machine oil rose like a memory. The trunk held layers: a wool naval blanket folded with military precision, a tin of grease-blackened tools, a wooden box of lenses wrapped in tissue, and beneath it all a leather portfolio, its straps stiff with age. Sarah slid it free and untied the knots, fingertips tingling the way they did on the cusp of a good idea. Blueprint paper unfurled across the floor in breaths of blue and white. Not house plans. These were stranger, concentric rings labeled with Greek letters, coils sketched in coppery pencil, annotations crowding the margins in a tidy, impatient hand. Phase resonance, cavitation threshold, hydrogen bond geometry, harmonic. On another sheet, a tank labeled reservoir, a lattice of rods and crystal chambers radiating like a star. Lily crouched beside her, tracing a finger an inch above the lines. "Is it a machine?" "Looks like one," Sarah breathed. "Looks like all of them." She tapped a note near the corner. "Water is medium, not fuel." The phrase shivered through her. Your great-great-grandfather wasn't crazy. They hauled the trunk to a patch of light on the bare floor, sorting the contents into piles: lenses, tools, papers. Sarah's world had always been made of other people's lists. Scrub this, fold that, please hurry. Now, with Lily passing her a spool of copper wire as reverently as if it were treasure, she felt something different unspool in her chest. Curiosity, with room to move. "Can we stay here tonight?" Lily asked, already building a fortress of blankets against the wall. "Let's see if the roof agrees," Sarah said. "And if not, we'll come back after we get flashlights and masks. This place is more dust than house." They worked until the cold found their fingers. Outside, the weeds hissed in the rising wind. When they left, Sarah locked the door and slid the key into her pocket as if it were the first real thing she'd owned in years. By morning, the town had grown teeth. 2 teens on bikes slowed to jeers they passed. "Enjoy the haunted dump, Jenkins?" Mrs. Gable's sedan crept by, her neck a stork's, as she craned for a look. Sarah squared her shoulders, handed Lily a donut, and steered them toward the library. The local history section smelled like old paper and lemon oil. Mrs. Ainsworth, the librarian, was a legend of her own, tiny, bright-eyed, encyclopedic. When Sarah asked about Arthur Miller, those eyes sharpened. "Your kin?" she asked. "His great-granddaughter?" Well, Mrs. Ainsworth vanished into the stacks and returned with a stack of bound newspapers and a thin folder of clippings. He left a trail, but most folks didn't bother to read it. They sat at a sunlit table and turned pages. There he was, a young Arthur in a field-gray uniform, an older Arthur at a county fair, standing beside a contraption of pipes and mirrors that looked like a musical instrument had swallowed a still. Headlines leapt: "Local vet claims water engine, proof of concept." The snide editorials were worse: "Whiskey thought, tin can science, crank or con?" Town rolls eyes. Then abruptly the mention stopped. A grainy photo from decades later showed the Miller place with its windows boarded, "Tax sale postponed, owner of record unknown." "He stopped asking for permission," Mrs. Ainsworth said, tapping the last column. "Or maybe he ran out of patience." On the way back, Lily pressed her face to the window, cheeks fogging the glass. They were mean to him. "People are loud when they're scared," Sarah said, "especially scared of being wrong." The afternoon slanted golden when they reached the house, then dimmed as they hauled trash to the curb and rolled up ruined carpet. In the fireplace, the first scrape of Sarah's brush sent a plume of soot into the air. She coughed, laughed, coughed again. Glamorous, this inheritance. "Mom," Lily said suddenly, peering into the firebox, "this brick wiggles." Sarah wiped her hands and felt along the mortar until she found it, one brick just a hair looser, as if someone had worried it with their thumb for years. She slid a putty knife into the seam and pried. The brick came free with a soft, obscene pop. Behind it, a hollow. Inside the hollow, wrapped in oilcloth, a palm-sized metal disc. It was heavier than it looked, etched with fine notches around the rim, its face layered with tiny interlocking gears beneath a glassy surface. At its center sat a smooth raised dome, the size of a coin. Lily leaned close. "It looks like a clock got turned into a spaceship." Sarah turned it over. On the back, a line of text, stamped so faint it nearly vanished. "For the door that isn't there, they found the door at dusk." Or rather, it found them. Lily was wrestling Ivy off the back steps when she yelped and jumped back. Beneath the mass of roots, a sheet of corroded metal caught the light. They clawed vines aside until a 4-foot square was exposed, rusted steel set into a concrete pad, no hinges, no handle, only a shallow circular depression in its center. Sarah's breath hitched. She knelt, pulled the disc from her pocket, and held it over the depression. The sizes matched exactly. "Arthur," she whispered, not sure if she meant the man or the house or the sudden nearness of him. "Wait," Lily said, clutching her sleeve. "What if it's bad? What if it's the point?" Sarah squeezed her hand. "We go together." She pressed the disc into the depression. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a click, delicate and final, like a lock remembering itself. The gears beneath the glass spun once, catching the last of the light. The dome sank flush. A faint hum rose from somewhere deep under their feet. The slab shivered. Dust sifted from the ivy. Slowly, impossibly, the door slid sideways into the earth, revealing a stairwell descending into cool, unlit air. They stood on the threshold, the smell of damp stone and old metal wafting up like a forgotten song. Lily's fingers found Sarah's. "We need flashlights," Sarah said, even as she leaned forward as if gravity had shifted. They fetched their phones, turned on the weak beams, and started down. The steps were narrow, poured concrete, the kind a person builds by hand when no one else believes in what's waiting at the bottom. The stairwell opened into a chamber so large the light couldn't find the far wall. The sound changed down there. Voices vanished, replaced by the soft, living hush of a place that had been alone for a long time. Panels lined the walls. Workbenches crowded with parts slept under sheets of oilcloth. And in the center, anchored to the floor like a heartbeat, rose a machine. Sarah had no words for it at first. It was both intricate and simple. Copper coils wound in elegant spirals, crystal cells nested in lattices of brass, a ring of valves like organ stops around a cylinder big as a dining table. Pipes led to a tank at the far end, and from there to a cistern that reflected their phone lights like night water. Lily's beam skated across the floor and froze. "Mom!" Her voice had changed shape, smaller, careful. The light rested on a rust-brown smear that led from the machine to a stool tipped on its side. At a bench nearby, a figure sat slumped forward, the back of a wool coat catching their light. Sarah moved before fear could unmake her legs. She reached the bench and knew, even before she touched the shoulder, even before the chill of an old winter moved through her fingers, Arthur Miller, his profile gentled by dust, sat as if sleep had outlasted him. A folded envelope waited in his hand. It was addressed to Sarah, the letters careful, the last stroke trailing as if time itself had tugged it from his grip. For a long moment the underground hummed around them. Sarah took the envelope and pressed it to her heart before she could open it. "Thank you," she said to the room, to the machine, to the man who had built both. Then she slit the paper and began to read. The letter trembled slightly in her hands as she read. The ink faded to brown, but the words alive with urgency. "My dear Sarah," it began, "if this reaches you, it means I failed to finish what I started. There are men who would rather keep the world chained to fire than let it drink light. They've called me mad, and perhaps I am. But madness is only vision without witnesses." Sarah's breath caught. The handwriting looped unevenly, steady at first, then weaker near the end. The engine works. It runs on the movement of water itself, the smallest dance of its particles. No heat, no smoke, no cost. It is the song of the world if we would only listen. But in the wrong hands, it will not free mankind. It will enslave it. That is why I sealed it here, under the roots, under the sky. You, Sarah, are the only one I trust to finish the work. Because you are not hungry for power, you only ever wanted a home. Tears blurred the last lines. Be careful, they will come. When the stars align over the oak, look north and follow the river of light. When she folded the letter, her hands were shaking. Lily stood silent beside her, small and solemn, eyes wide and wet. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they'd hurt him." Sarah crouched, cupping her daughter's cheek. "He wasn't afraid. He built something he believed in, and now it's our turn to protect it." The machine loomed in front of them, patient, waiting. Sarah traced the copper coils with her fingers. "If this really works," she murmured, "then he found a way to turn the impossible into kindness." For the next few days, the house became a world unto itself. By morning, they cleared the first floor. By noon, they were back underground. Sarah set up a small work table beside the engine, her father's old toolbox spread open. Lily served as scout and archivist, sorting through piles of schematics and notes, reading aloud fragments of equations she didn't understand, but somehow respected. Phase threshold depended on sound frequency. Water memory, resonance carries, imprint. Safeguard, responsive to harmonic pattern only. Sarah sat back. Harmonic pattern, she glanced at Lily. He didn't want it activated by accident. It needs a key, but not a metal one. Lily's brow furrowed. "Like music," Sarah smiled. "Like music." That night, they found an old gramophone on the second floor, warped and dusty, but still intact. Tucked beside it were several records labeled Tests A through G. She carried them downstairs, her pulse quickening. The gramophone's crank turned stiffly, but obeyed. She placed Test A on the spindle, lowered the needle, and waited. A faint, crystalline tone spilled into the air, long, low, rising in gentle waves like wind across water. The copper coils responded. They shimmered faintly, light running through them like veins awakening. Lily gasped. "It's listening." The tone shifted higher, trembling toward a resonance that made the air itself quiver. Then the light flared and died. Smoke curled from one of the glass chambers. Sarah cut the record short. "Too much," she said, coughing. "He wasn't done calibrating." But the proof was undeniable. The machine moved. Days bled into weeks. Sarah worked at night after Lily slept, following Arthur's equations, cross-referencing notes, testing frequencies through an old laptop. Each time, the reaction grew steadier, and in those quiet hours, she found herself talking to the air. "You gave me a curse that's a gift, old man," she whispered. "You knew I'd be stubborn enough to try." Winter settled over the valley. The town forgot her quickly, except for Mrs. Gable, who drove by often enough to feed rumors that the maid's gone mad in that haunted house. Sarah ignored it. Progress hummed beneath her feet. Then came the knock. It was early evening, and the sunset still clung to the frost on the window panes. A man in a black coat stood on the porch. Polished shoes, expensive smile, the kind of ease that came from entitlement. "Mrs. Jenkins?" he asked, flashing an identification card too fast to read. "I'm from the Office of Estate Valuation. We're conducting a review of properties linked to Arthur Miller." Sarah's instincts prickled. "I've already filed the paperwork." "Of course," he said, voice like honey poured over glass. "But there are unusual assets unaccounted for. May I come in?" Lily appeared in the hallway behind her, clutching her bear. The man's gaze flicked toward her, sharp and assessing, before he smiled again. "Lovely home. Historic." Sarah stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "If you have questions, send them through my attorney." The man tilted his head. "You've inherited more than walls, Mrs. Jenkins. That makes you very interesting to some very powerful people." Her pulse kicked hard. "I'm sure it does." He slipped a card into her pocket as he left, his breath ghosting near her ear. For when curiosity turns to fear. That night, Sarah packed. Tools, notebooks, the metal disc, the letter, all into boxes. "Mom?" Lily's voice trembled. "We're leaving?" "Just moving the important things," Sarah said. "Somewhere safer." She remembered Arthur's final words. "Look north and follow the river of light." The next morning, as dawn broke pale over the hills, Sarah loaded their old truck. The road north shimmered with frost, and far ahead, beyond the tree line, the river caught the sunrise and turned it to silver. "Hold on, baby," Sarah said softly, shifting into gear. "We're going where the light leads." Behind them, the Miller house stood quiet, the copper engine slumbering below, waiting, listening, dreaming of water and song. They drove until the town's lights thinned to a handful and the road narrowed into a ribbon of frost between pines. The river traveled beside them, a blade of pewter under the morning. When the bridge appeared, a single span of iron older than any reasonable budget, Sarah turned onto a logging track that climbed into the foothills. Arthur's maps in her head aligned with the angle of the sun, the curve of the water, the feel of the land he had loved like a friend. They reached a small plateau chiseled from the slope, hidden by firs and rock. To anyone else, it was nothing, just wind and lichened stone, but Sarah felt the hush settle in her bones. She set the brake, cut the engine, and let the silence open. "Is this it?" Lily asked, breath making tiny ghosts. "Part of it." Sarah jumped down and scanned the tree line. "We stash what we can here. Then we go back tonight." "Back?" Lily hugged her bear tighter. "Why?" "Your great-great-grandfather left one more riddle," Sarah said, "and for that, we need the stars." They made 3 runs before dusk, moving in loops, drive south, load the truck in minutes, drive north again, and vanish into the trees. The mountain took their secrets gladly. Copper coils and notebooks slept in tarps in a shallow cave that smelled of damp stone and old air. Sarah laid the metal disc wrapped in oilcloth in a crack she could find in the dark by touch alone. When the first cold pinpricks of evening scattered over the ridge, they returned to Miller Place with their lights off, coasting the last block as quietly as thieves. The house crouched in its lot like a thought no one wanted to finish. Sarah parked around back and led Lily in through the kitchen, her flashlight beam kept low. The attic ladder groaned under their weight. Dust rose in lazy galaxies. The room was a museum of things left behind. Trunks with broken straps, crates of bottles feathered in grime, a sewing machine frozen mid-stitch. Against the far wall, under a moth-eaten tarp, something long and brass waited. Sarah drew the tarp back. The telescope gleamed dully, its tube a burnished, dented length, gears and micrometer knobs along the mount. Someone had polished it once with love. Along the main barrel, etched so fine she had to angle the light to see, a lattice of lines crossed and recrossed like a map's delicate veins. A single star had been circled with patient strokes. Polaris. Lily whispered, reverent, "It's beautiful." "It's precise," Sarah said, running her fingertips over the engraving. She crouched to the mount and found a hand-drawn card wedged beneath it. 3 stars, 1 light, 3 points, 1 place. The thing that stays when all else moves. Polaris, the fixed point. Arthur wasn't romantic. He was a builder. Even his poetry was a blueprint. Sarah eased the telescope toward the northern window. The glass had been replaced generations ago by someone who loved the view. Through the pane, the sky opened like quiet held in the chest. She adjusted the mount, sighted along the barrel, and centered the circled star. The etched lines came alive in her mind, sliding until they overlaid the darkness beyond. "Okay," she murmured. 3 points. She tapped the card. The oak, the flat stone by the stream, and what's the third? The well, Lily said instantly. She'd read the same notes, folded and refolded. The one with the star carved in it. They climbed down, flashlight beams skittering over banisters. Outside, the yard crackled with frost. The oak at the property's edge stood black against the stars, its branches like splayed fingers trying to hold the night in place. They used an old measuring tape and a length of string to mark where the oak stood relative to the stream, then crossed the brittle grass to the low stone well. Weather had blurred the carving, but under their light the 5 points of a star showed, worn almost to a whisper. Lily held one end of the string at the well, face intent. Sarah measured, checked, rechecked, moved a foot right, then 6 inches left. She stood in the middle of nothing special, breath fogging, and knew with the full certainty of someone who has been underestimated too long. Here, they dug with a garden spade in their hands. The earth gave resentfully at first, then easier as if it recognized what was coming. 4 inches down, the metal sang when the spade kissed it. Sarah brushed soil away with her fingers. A small chest lay there, steel darkened to a winter shadow, seams sealed with resin, long hardened to amber. "No lock," Lily breathed. "How does it open?" "Like everything else," Sarah said, heartbeat thudding. "With the right key." She wiped the dirt from her palms onto her jeans and reached into her coat for the oilcloth bundle. The disk felt cold even through the wrap, like a coin left on a headstone. On the lid, almost invisible, was a shallow circle the size of the dome. Sarah set the disk into the depression and pressed. For an instant, nothing. Then a soft click, a sigh, as if the box had been holding its breath for decades. The lid lifted a fraction. Sarah raised it the rest of the way. Inside lay a stack of thin plates, each no thicker than a pane of glass, each glowing faintly from within. Not lamp glow, not LED, but a living, tidal blue that ebbed and returned as if it were breathing. As she lifted the first plate between finger and thumb, faint patterns within it shifted like frost, traced by a quiet, invisible pen. It was etched, not on the surface, but through its very heart, with filigrees so delicate they made her eyes ache. Circuits made of light and symmetry. Water was a crystal when it wanted to be. Arthur had made it remember. Lily's breath snagged. "It looks like snowflakes trapped in a window." Sarah swallowed throat tight. There was a folded note tucked beside the plates, Arthur's hand steady again for a page. "These are the hearts. Do not heat them. Do not force them. They must be sung awake. If the pattern is wrong, they will sleep again rather than break. That is their mercy and our protection." She slid the first plate back, closing the lid with care. The blue dimmed, but didn't die. Lily wrapped her arms around herself and shivered, not from cold, Sarah thought, but from wonder that had nowhere to go but into her bones. "Now what?" Lily asked. "Now," Sarah said, looking up at Polaris winking through the oak branches, "we make a place no one can reach unless they come in on their knees." They worked in swift loops the next 2 nights. The river was their guide north, a ribbon of sky fallen to earth. At the end of the track Arthur had marked on a map no one but him had cared to understand, the mountain opened its mouth. The cave was a seam pulled in the rock, narrow enough to discourage boredom, deep enough to swallow sound. Inside, a cathedral of stone waited, stalactites like old teeth, a floor pocked with bowls where water had thought carefully before leaving. Sarah set the plates on a ledge she had cleaned with the devotion of a chapel keeper. The metal disc went into a crack above the entrance, a last trick for a door no one could find. She made trip after trip with coils and valves, easing them down the passage in a harness. She improvised from rope and stubbornness. Lily kept watch, the little general, her bear tucked under her arm and a whistle around her neck. On the 3rd night, headlights raked the trees above Miller Place, and a car lingered where cars didn't. Sarah and Lily sat on the kitchen floor in the dark, holding their breath as footsteps creaked across the porch. The knob turned and rattled uselessly. A long silence, then the soft sweep of a glove against glass. The car left. The cold stayed. "We have to finish," Sarah whispered into Lily's hair. "We have to move the rest." They did, until the house felt like a stage set around an empty backstage. Only the engine below remained, its bulk too vast to move through a world that would have called the police if she tried. She made choices Arthur would have scolded and approved of in the same breath. She rigged the old basement door with a trip that would flood the stairwell, set a siphon to choke the cistern to a trickle, and wired a crude alarm that would wake the engine safeguards if someone tampered. When they carried the final box up from the cave at dawn, the east was a thin promise along the horizon. Lily was quiet until they reached the truck. "Mom?" "Yes?" "What if they find us anyway?" Sarah buckled her in, then rested her palms on the steering wheel and let the question sit. She remembered scrubbing other people's floors while their voices floated above her as if she were furniture, remembered counting tips like penance, remembered every time she had made herself small to be tolerated. She looked at her daughter, at Polaris fading in the brightening sky, at the river that had kept its word for 1,000 years. "Then we make them see," she said. "On our terms." Back at the cave, they laid out the plates like hymns. Sarah wired a small test rig with copper and patience. The gramophone wouldn't survive the damp, so she used her laptop speakers. Their tinny courage enough for a proof. Test C rose, pure and narrow, and the first plate answered, faint blue swelling to soft dawn. She stopped the sound, then tried test F. The glow flickered, almost offended, and settled. Lily held her breath. "It really listens. It chooses." Sarah closed her eyes, hearing something under the notes, a pattern that was less sound than promise. He made it so this could never be stolen by force. It only wakes for gentleness. They packed for sleep, their breath clouding in the cave's cold. Before Sarah clicked off the lantern, Lily's small voice lifted into the dark, hesitant at first, then clear. A simple melody, almost a lullaby, hummed more than sung. The blue in the plates brightened, recognizing something even the laptop hadn't found. A human timbre, the micro-tremors of a living chest, the unrepeatable signature of care. Sarah turned back slowly, heart knocking. "Again," she whispered. Lily sang a second line. The plates answered, their glow steadying into a soft, patient shine that threw gentle light along the stone ceiling like the river had come to live inside the mountain. Somewhere far beneath, she felt the engine in Miller Place stir as if it had heard a far-off friend. Sarah put a hand against the cave wall and laughed once, a breath cracked with relief. "Arthur," she said to the rock, to the air, to the man who had trusted a woman with a broom and a girl with a song, "we hear you." Outside, Polaris held its post above the black trees, and in the cave the river of light finally had some place to rest. The first snow came early that year, wrapping the valley in silence. Sarah woke before dawn to the faint hiss of flakes against the window and the colder hush of an engine that had decided to rest. She and Lily had been living between two worlds, the cave where the plates slept and the borrowed cabin higher up the slope. By day, they scouted, repaired, learned the way the mountain breathed. By night, Sarah tested configurations on small prototypes, while Lily drew constellations in the margins of Arthur's notebooks. The knock came not from a person, but from the echo of tires on frozen gravel. Headlights cut through the snow-thick dark. Sarah eased the lantern low, pulled Lily close, and listened. 3 doors slammed, muffled by distance, then voices. Men, too even, too calm, not lost hikers. She packed in minutes, the laptop, the small coil assembly, the strongest of the plates wrapped in wool. "Remember what we practiced," she whispered. Lily nodded, her face pale but steady. They left through the back, boots whispering through the powder, and followed a deer trail down to the river. Below, the cave mouth waited like an old friend. Sarah crouched at the entrance, brushing away snow from the stone to reveal the crack that hid the metal disc. She pressed it once, twice. The panel shifted, sealing itself with a low hum. Inside, she lit a single lamp and set the wrapped plate on the ledge. From outside, a voice called, amplified by the cold, "Mrs. Jenkins, we just want to talk." Lily's fingers tightened on her coat. Sarah said nothing. Footsteps scraped closer. The man from the porch weeks ago stepped into the clearing, flanked by 2 others in black coats. The leader's smile was unchanged. "You're resourceful. Arthur would be proud. You don't get to say his name." "Come now," he said, brushing snow from his sleeve. The world could use what he built. We can protect you." "You mean own it?" He sighed, genuinely weary, as if her defiance were an inconvenience. "If you don't cooperate, you'll disappear under a landslide no one will question. We have engineers who can reverse engineer his work from the remains." Sarah's pulse was steady now. Fear had burned itself out weeks ago. "Then you should have brought a better team." He frowned, a flicker of curiosity crossing his eyes before the ground answered her. The first tremor rolled under their feet, mild, almost polite. Then came the second, deeper. Snow fell from the branches in soft bursts. The man's head snapped toward the hillside, confusion shifting to alarm. "You triggered something?" "Yes," Sarah said, "a safeguard." The earth groaned, a long sigh from the deep. Cracks veined through the clearing, light, blue-white, liquid as fire, spilled up through them. The men stumbled back, shouting. Sarah pulled Lily behind her as the glow surged, then dimmed to a soft pulse. The tremor eased. When the light faded, the intruders were gone, retreated or swallowed. Sarah didn't check which. Inside the cave, the air thrummed gently. The plates shimmered where she had left them, their glow calmer now, like a heartbeat settling after exertion. Lily sat on the floor, knees drawn up. "It's alive," she whispered. "It's awake," Sarah said. Over the next days, word spread through the valley of strange lights and minor quakes. The few locals still curious about Miller Place avoided it entirely. Sarah used the reprieve to finish what Arthur had started. Guided by his notes, she assembled a smaller version of the water engine in the cave, a waist-high lattice of copper and crystal, its heart the plate that had sung to Lily's voice. The first test came on the 6th night. Sarah filled the reservoir from the river and aligned the coils. "Go ahead," she said. Lily sang. Just one verse this time, a single line. The engine stirred, lights tracing its spiral until the air smelled faintly of rain. The gauges rose, the rotor began to spin without friction, pulling energy from the vibration of sound itself. For the first time, the blue light held steady, feeding itself. Sarah exhaled a laugh that broke into something almost like a sob. "We did it," Lily grinned. "He did it. We just listened." For a week, they kept the machine running, learning its rhythms. It produced enough energy to power the cabin, the lights, even the small heater. Snow melted at the cave's edge where warm air vented gently. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive in the way a river is alive, moving because movement is what truth does. But the silence didn't last. On the 9th night, drones appeared, 2, then 5, whining overhead, their red eyes scanning the ridge. Sarah killed the lights, covered the mouth of the cave, and crouched beside Lily. The hum of the drones faded northward, then returned. They were mapping the area. "They'll come back," Sarah said. "Then we have to tell someone," Lily whispered. "Who? The same kind of people who buried this once already?" Lily hesitated. "Maybe not the powerful ones. Maybe the ones who still tell stories." Sarah stared at her, realization blooming slow and dangerous. Arthur's last note, "When the stars align, look north and follow the river of light." Maybe he hadn't meant geography. Maybe he meant information. The next morning, Sarah hiked down to the old ranger station where a single broadband antenna still worked. She typed for an hour on a borrowed terminal, attaching compressed files of Arthur's designs, photos of the plates, video of the engine's hum. At the top of the email she wrote, "To anyone who still believes progress can be kind." She set the recipients to a list she didn't entirely trust: journalists, scientists, whistleblowers. Then she hit send. When she returned to the cave, Lily was waiting with the bear in her arms. "What did you do?" "Turned on the light," Sarah said. "Now they can't shut it off." That evening, the first global leak went live. Headlines screamed of "Water Engine Discovery Verified." Video of the blue-lit cavern looped across every feed. Governments denied involvement. Energy stocks plummeted. And on a small mountainside, mother and daughter watched the world wake up. Lily looked up at her. "Are we safe now?" "No," Sarah said, "but we're not alone anymore." The river outside shone under the moon, silver threading through black. Somewhere down the valley, power lines flickered, then steadied with a new hum, the same frequency that filled the cave, gentle and endless. Sarah put an arm around Lily and listened. For the first time in her life, the sound of the world wasn't something to fear. It was a song they'd started, and it was still being sung. The world didn't believe it at first. News anchors called it a hoax. Corporations called it theft. And governments called it a threat. Yet the video of the humming blue engine, the one that looked like it breathed, had already spread too far to vanish. Within a day, thousands of scientists, engineers, and hobbyists had downloaded the schematics Sarah uploaded. By the third day, improvised replicas appeared in garages from Nairobi to Reykjavik, and by the fifth, one worked. Sarah saw it on a shaky live stream. A man in Brazil holding a glass tube glowing with blue light, powering a fan from a bucket of river water. "Miller's Light," the caption read. The comments overflowed in dozens of languages. "We can make this. No more oil. Hope." She closed the laptop, her heart pounding in disbelief and awe. "He did it, Lily. He actually did it." Lily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching designs for a tiny version of the engine with crayons. "We did it, Mom," she said simply, as if it were obvious. "It's ours now, too." But the reaction wasn't all light. That night, the sky over the valley flickered with something else. Helicopter beams sweeping through falling snow. The hum of rotor blades thickened the air. Sarah doused the lantern. "Grab your boots," she whispered. "They're coming." They ran through the pines, the frozen ground snapping underfoot. Behind them, spotlights tore across the trees, chasing shadows. The drones had returned, larger now, their red sensors blinking like furious eyes. Sarah and Lily reached the cave's mouth just as a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Sarah Jenkins, you are in possession of stolen federal property. Surrender immediately." Sarah laughed once under her breath, raw, exhausted, defiant. "Stolen?" she murmured. "You can't steal sunlight." They ducked inside. The engine still glowed faintly in the corner, pulsing with Lily's earlier song. Sarah knelt and pulled the metal disc from its hiding spot. "Remember what we practiced?" Lily nodded, clutching the bear to her chest. "Sing." "Sing." Outside, boots thudded in the snow. The cave walls trembled with the vibration of approaching vehicles. Sarah placed the disc on the small panel at the base of the engine and nodded to Lily. The girl closed her eyes, voice rising in a single, clear note that cut through the rumble like light through smoke. The hum of the machine swelled to meet it. The blue glow intensified until it became white, flooding the chamber in pure radiance. The soldiers outside shouted. Their equipment crackled, overloaded. A surge rippled outward, non-lethal, but final. One by one, the engines of the vehicles choked and died. The lights blinked out. Silence rolled down the mountain like mercy. Lily's voice faded, trembling into stillness. Sarah caught her as she sagged, dizzy. "I'm okay," Lily whispered, eyes fluttering open. "It just listens hard." Sarah smiled shakily. It listened perfectly. When the light dimmed, they stepped outside. The snow was falling again, thick and slow. The men in black were gone, retreated down the mountain or waiting somewhere beyond sight. The only sound was the river. For 3 days afterward, the world spun faster. Major networks confirmed that the Miller Drive was genuine. Academic journals demanded verification, but universities were already publishing open-source blueprints. Ordinary people filmed themselves powering houses from wells, cars from ponds. The phrase free energy stopped being metaphor. Governments scrambled to regulate what couldn't be contained. Oil stocks collapsed. Countries declared emergencies not because of war, but because no one knew how to tax what flowed from every faucet. Yet in the chaos, something quieter began, a flicker of cooperation. Scientists who had never spoken worked together across continents to stabilize the design. For once, invention didn't belong to the rich. It belonged to anyone with a bucket of water and belief. Sarah and Lily stayed hidden in the cabin, watching it unfold through old laptops and shortwave radio. Their names weren't public yet, but the story of the woman and the girl in the mountain had already become legend. Lily watched a clip of protesters marching with signs that read, "Light for all and Arthur's gift belongs to the world." She turned to Sarah. "They're fighting about who should own it." Sarah sighed. "People always fight about miracles, but the miracle doesn't care." That night, she dreamed of Arthur sitting in the workshop, alive again, his hands grease-stained, smiling faintly. "You've done what I couldn't," he said. "You gave it away." When she woke, the snow outside glowed faintly blue, reflecting the cave's distant pulse. A week later, a letter arrived, not by mail, but hand-delivered by a stranger in a Navy coat. He introduced himself as Colonel David Hayes, liaison for an international peace technology initiative. "We're forming something new," he said, "a consortium to protect the Miller engine and ensure it stays free." Sarah studied him. "Protect it from whom?" He met her gaze without flinching. "From everyone who forgets that power isn't ownership." He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was an official offer: relocation, resources, and amnesty, if she would oversee the ethical release of the technology. At the bottom of the page, one line stood out in handwritten ink. "Your great-grandfather wanted you to have a choice. We intend to honor that." That night, Sarah sat by the fire, the letter folded in her lap. "What do you think, Lil?" Lily leaned against her shoulder. "I think Grandpa Arthur didn't want it hidden forever." Sarah smiled. "Neither do I." 2 weeks later, they boarded a flight to Geneva under new names, carrying only a small metal disc and a handful of blueprints. Outside the window, the sky stretched wide and bright, clouds glowing like rivers of light. Lily pressed her face to the glass. "It looks like it's singing," she whispered. Sarah closed her eyes, hearing the hum that had changed everything, the sound of water dreaming itself into power, of a family's curse turned into a gift. The world below was messy, uncertain, terrified, but it was listening now, and somewhere in that listening, maybe, was hope. When the plane touched down in Geneva, snow was falling again, soft, deliberate, as if the sky itself had decided to begin anew. Sarah and Lily stepped out into a different kind of silence, not the loneliness of forgotten places, but the quiet that comes before history shifts. They were met by Colonel Hayes at the gate. He wasn't flanked by soldiers this time, but by scientists, men and women from countries Sarah had only ever read about. Japan, Kenya, Norway, Chile, India, people of every accent, carrying the same look in their eyes, the look of those who had glimpsed something pure and were terrified of breaking it. "Welcome," Hayes said simply. "The world owes you both more than it can repay." Sarah smiled faintly. "Let's just make sure it doesn't owe us again." They were escorted to a mountain facility overlooking Lake Geneva, glass and steel on the outside, but warm within. There were no guards, only cameras, and no laboratories of ownership, only open tables and transparent walls. "This is the Arthur Miller Foundation," Hayes explained, "the first lab with no patents, no governments, and no investors, only promises." On the main floor, Sarah saw rows of engines humming softly, smaller, safer versions of Arthur's original creation. The water reservoirs gleamed like crystal hearts. One of the engineers, a young woman from Nairobi, approached Lily and handed her a pair of insulated gloves. "You're the one whose song woke the first machine, right?" she said gently. Lily blushed. "I didn't mean to." "That's how all the best discoveries happen," the woman said, "by accident and love." Days became weeks. Sarah worked side by side with teams from across the world, refining the Miller engine into something any village could build. A simple structure of glass, copper, and harmony. Instead of fuel, it used resonance. Instead of ownership, it asked for cooperation. The press called it the Dawn Power. Nations that once fought over oil now competed to build schools powered by wells. Yet amid the praise, Sarah could feel the tremors of greed stirring again. Old empires don't die quietly, they mutate. One evening, Hayes called her into his office. The blinds were drawn, the light low. "There's talk," he said. "Private interests want to buy influence within the foundation. They say it's to ensure stability, but we both know what that means." "Control," Sarah finished. He nodded. "They'll try to convince you. They'll say they can protect you and Lily. But the moment you sign anything, this stops belonging to the people." Sarah stared out at the lake, its surface a sheet of silver moonlight. "Arthur warned me about this," she murmured. "He said light always draws moths." The next morning, the foundation held a press conference. Cameras from around the world broadcast live as Sarah stepped to the podium, Lily beside her. "2 years ago," she began, "my daughter and I inherited a ruin, a forgotten house, a broken legacy, and a secret that was never meant to be hidden. What my great-grandfather built was not a weapon, not property, and not a miracle reserved for the powerful. It was a reminder that nature doesn't belong to us. It includes us." She paused. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the prototype engine behind her. "So today, I'm announcing something simple," she continued. "The Miller engine will remain open source forever. No corporation, no government, no foundation, not even this one, can own it. We've embedded its design into the global web, mirrored in thousands of independent servers. If it's ever altered for profit, the original pattern will reappear, free to all." A wave of murmurs swept the crowd. Some faces shone with relief, others with fury. A reporter shouted, "What about your safety? What about control?" Sarah looked down at Lily, who met her gaze steadily. "You can't control a river," she said softly. "You can only learn to flow with it." The world reacted in chaos and wonder. Stocks crashed again. Power companies collapsed. Politicians screamed betrayal. But ordinary people, teachers, mechanics, farmers, began to install the small humming engines in their homes. In towns that had never seen electricity, children read by blue light for the first time. And through it all, Sarah and Lily stayed quiet, letting the storm rage. They knew storms always clear the air. One night, months later, Sarah stood on the balcony of their Geneva apartment. The city below glowed faintly blue. Thousands of Miller engines running in harmony, their resonance turning the air itself into a soft chorus. Lily was asleep inside, her bear tucked under her arm. Hayes joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You changed everything," he said. Sarah shook her head. "Arthur did. We just stopped hiding." He studied her face. "You could have taken the money, the protection, the power." Sarah smiled faintly. "I already have power, the kind you can share without losing it." They stood in silence for a long time. In the distance, over the quiet hum of the city, the first aurora shimmered across the European sky. Faint ribbons of green and blue, singing the same frequency as the engines below. Sarah whispered, "Do you hear it?" Hayes frowned. "Hear what?" "The sound of the world remembering itself." On the last day of winter, Sarah and Lily took the train up the lakeside, past vineyards sleeping under frost and villages with chimneys that breathed like contented animals. They carried no security detail, no briefcases, just a thermos of cocoa and a small tin of cookies Lily had baked in a kitchen that ran on a bowl of tap water and a song. They stepped off at a small station where the path curved toward the hills. A trail climbed among beaches and gray rock to a ridge that looked out over the whole of Lake Geneva, silver, patient, alive. The air felt thinner up there, like the beginning of a thought. Sarah set the thermos on a flat stone. Lily sat cross-legged and let the wind tug at her hair. For a while they said nothing. Silence had become their favorite language, one where nothing was demanded and everything could be heard. Far below, the city hummed, a single chord held by 1,000,000 tiny engines. The sound was so steady now that you only noticed it when you tried to remember a time without it. Lily broke the quiet first. "Do you think he knows?" "Arthur?" Sarah smiled. "If there's any knowing to be had, he's having it." Lily poured cocoa into 2 tin cups. "I wish he could see the lights." "He can," Sarah said. "Maybe not with eyes, but he can." They drank in small sips, steam curling away like written breath. A kestrel hung motionless over the slope, then slipped away, effortless as a thought that decides not to become a word. Down the path, footsteps crunched. Colonel Hayes appeared, hands in his coat, not intruding so much as arriving at the same answer. He nodded once, took the 3rd cup Lily offered, and leaned on the rail. "Geneva passed an ordinance this morning," he said. "No patents on water resonance devices within city limits. It's spreading." Sarah huffed a laugh. "We're making laws to protect what should never have needed laws." "That's how you know it's working," Hayes said, "when the rules try to keep pace with decency." Lily tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, when the world isn't scared anymore, what will we be?" Sarah thought about every floor she had scrubbed to a shine that didn't belong to her, every empty cupboard she had pretended could hold more, every night she'd fallen asleep to the sound of someone else's power. She thought of a basement lit by blue lungs, of a cave that listened, of a song that made the dark choose gentleness. She looked at her daughter, whose voice had turned a machine into a promise. Home, she said. We'll be home. They walked back slowly as evening lowered itself over the mountains. At the apartment, Lily set Major Ted on the radiator and wrote a postcard to Mrs. Ainsworth at the library. We found what he hid. It was a door the whole world could fit through. She addressed another to the Miller place, though no postman would carry it. Dear house, thank you for keeping the secret until we could hear it. Later, when Lily slept, Sarah stood by the window. The lake was a dark sheet pricked with boats that pulsed gently, their small on-board units exhaling light. On the bookshelf, Arthur's letter lay under glass, not as a relic, but as a reminder. Madness is only vision without witnesses. She thought of the men who had tried to buy a river, of those who had called it theft to give away what was never theirs. They would keep scheming. Power always does. But there were too many witnesses now. The pattern had become a chorus. A single hand can smother a candle. It takes a wind to put out a sky. Behind her, a soft thump. Lily shuffled in, blanket around her shoulders, hair an unruly halo. "Can't sleep," she murmured. "It's loud." "What is?" "The world," Lily said, grinning into a yawn. "It's happy loud." Sarah laughed and lifted the blanket's edge. They stood together, two shapes in a pane of glass, watching the city breathe. A faint aurora rinsed the northern horizon, green, then blue, then a pale, impossible rose, the atmosphere still learning how to sing back. "Do you remember the house when we first saw it?" Lily asked. "Every splinter," Sarah said. "It looked empty," Lily said, "but it was full." "So are we," Sarah whispered. Somewhere a church bell counted the hour. In the lane below, a cyclist glided past without pedals, coasting under his own small sun. The hum through the floorboards made the teaspoons on the counter tremble with almost music. Sarah pressed her palm to the window and felt the cold answer. "Good night, Arthur," she said, not to the past but to the present that had finally caught up with it. "We'll keep the line steady." She turned off the lamp. The room settled into a blue that wasn't darkness. Outside, the wind moved across the lake and into the city and through the narrow streets and open windows, carrying a sound that was neither machine nor miracle, but something older, finally remembered, water thinking in light, and people listening. And in a little apartment on a hill, a mother and her daughter fell asleep to it, unafraid, unowned, at last, and entirely home.